All right, good evening. Welcome to the May 5th meeting of the Millis School Committee. I'll start once again. Thank you all for joining us virtually. I know we are, while the meeting participants are on Zoom, we're being watched from the public through YouTube. And the way questions are going to filter is if people on YouTube are watching, if you could type in the questions, we have people monitoring those. And so we'll have someone read those questions off of YouTube probably after each section or presentation, but they will go towards the end, and then we'll check again right after we've gone through all the formal parts if there are any other questions people have written in to make sure we can address those. I will start by taking a roll call vote of attendance. Myself, Mark Conroy, I'm here. Rob.
Here.
Right. Steve Catalano.
Here.
Denise Gibbons.
Here.
Carrie Roach.
I'm here.
We have teacher representative Riley Dunn.
Here.
Student representative Ben Pedelka.
Yeah.
And Superintendent Nancy Gustafson.
Here.
All right. Again, we don't really have open session. Action items. First action item is consideration to approve the April 21st meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Catalano.
someone I think is live streaming the YouTube. So if you could
Is that what that?
I can hear it.
Yeah, back.
So whoever's doing that, I went to it and it started to do that. So just shut it down.
We don't really have open session. Action items. First action item is consideration to approve the April 21st meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Catalano.
I make a motion to approve the YouTube. So April 21st, 2020 school committee meeting minutes. So whoever's doing that, I went to it and it started to do that. So just shut it down.
All right. I can
If
see
you
what.
hear me, it'll replay it in about 7 seconds.
Right.
I think it's
Joan, do you have the
Joan.
YouTube going by any chance? Do you, because you have to monitor it?
I have YouTube going, but I've got the sound shut off.
Someone has it.
Boy, hotness.
You can mute.
There we go.
Better.
All right.
We're not going to point fingers, whoever that was. Joe.
Doesn't matter. It's all good. All right. All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
All right.
Who seconded that? I'm sorry.
I seconded. I don't know if anyone else did, but I did.
Perfect. All right.
My husband in the background is saying nay. Just ignore him.
All right. Second item, consideration to approve maintenance contract. All right. Do we have the maintenance?
I didn't see the maintenance
I
contract.
didn't see
see
it in
the-
the folder.
I didn't see it either.
Mr. Wigan, would you like to explain the maintenance contract?
Yes. I apologize that you didn't get it. It's basically an elevator maintenance contract. It has a 3-year term, which is why it needs to come before you for approval. Mr. Engler has been negotiating with the company for most of the year to get a new elevator maintenance company. It's required by insurance. It's required by state law that we get our elevators. And when I say our elevators, it's not just the up and down elevators, but that includes our lifts that we have as well. We have lifts for stages. My recollection is that it's $2,700 a year. Multiply that times 3 years, and that's the extent of the contract. Again, John worked very hard on the contract. It is something that we would have somebody doing this, and from my perspective, it was about what I would expect for, 2 buildings and the number of elevators and lifts that we have.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Catalano.
Terry, what were we paying previously? And is this a cost change or is this a company change? And why the
This
change?
is a company change. We were not happy with the previous company, and we were paying a little bit more. My recollection is we were paying about $2,900.
So we're going to pay a little bit less, but
Yep.
get a better company?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Mr. Catalano.
I make a motion to approve a 3-year elevator maintenance contract spending up to let's give $2,800 a year. Give a little wiggle room.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving the new maintenance contract?
Aye.
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 Aye. There you go.
Thank
All
you.
right. Motion carries, no problem. All right, the next item is our superintendent's report, and the first item in that is an update on remote learning.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. Do you want to do student and teacher reps?
Oh, yeah,
Sorry.
yes, I do. Sorry. So we'll start with the student rep. Ben, go ahead.
So I am a first-hand at online learning, so I might be able to give a little insight on that. But currently, I know that MCAS testing has been waived for this year. AP tests will be taken online. Each class is specific, so there's information for specific classes. And students have continued with online learning. Assignments have been released by teachers, and we've just been doing our assignments.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
And teacher rep, Riley.
Claude Brown is beginning the class placement process, which they're doing virtually this year, with teachers working in grade level groups to create balanced classes for when classes resume in September. And in the middle school and the high school, the trout were released today into the Charles River. All fish successfully made the trip. Thank you to Mr. Rich Knowles for his generous donation of the tanks and the equipment, Ms. Hickey and her 7th grade class, Ms. Cheney and her Fish Are Friends Club for their work in raising the fish and getting them ready for their release into the wild. There will be a virtual webinar with MathWorks on Wednesday, May 6th from 12:45 to 2 p.m. Students will have the opportunity to hear from 4 engineers at MathWorks and learn about their jobs and roles at MathWorks, as well as their educational path. After the presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions directly with the participants. To join the webinar, you must pre-register, and to register, please email Mrs. Day. Millis High School is proud to once again be included in the U.S. News and World Report's rankings of the best high schools in America. And Millis High School students are invited to the free virtual prom live on May 9th, beginning at 7. Students need to register at www.virtualprom.live. The class of 2020, valedictorian and salutatorian, will be introduced to their class at a meeting tomorrow evening, and an official notice will be sent out to the media and the community afterwards. And the Millis cross country team for boys and girls, grades 7 through 12, interest form was sent out through the listserv this week. Anyone who's interested in participating in cross country in the fall is encouraged to fill out the form by May 15th. If you didn't get the email, reach out to Coach Clayton. And interest forms for other fall sports were sent this week as well. So students and parents should keep an eye out for those. That's it.
All right.
Ms. Dunn, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The trout, when does fishing season begin? And did we teach the trout any protective measures? Just asking.
I cannot speak to how the trout were trained for their release.
I look forward to your follow-up at the next meeting.
Absolutely.
Steve will look out for them in his 4 a.m. walks around town.
I will protect them as much as I can.
Updates.
He will add them to his wildlife friends. All right. All right, so now we'll move on to the superintendent's report and our update on remote learning.
Just going to pull the presentation up. Hold on, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had to unmute. I have invited our leadership team here tonight because they have truly been doing, along with their staff members, an incredible job developing, implementing our remote learning plan. So at the end of our presentation, which will take about between 15 and 20 minutes, we will answer any questions that the committee and the public might have. As you know, we are now in phase 3 of a response to the COVID-19 health crisis. From March 13th, when we decided to close schools, through the following week, the days were considered snow days without a structured approach to learning, but we geared up and started planning them. And we always had a focus on connecting with students, engaging students, and trying to ensure student well-being. Jen, next slide, please. So the goal has always been, first and foremost, to try to serve students' social emotional needs. Their safety and well-being has always been and will always remain the #1 priority. Equity and access were prime considerations, making sure that every single student in the Millis Public Schools had the equipment and the internet access to continue with remote learning. Connecting with their peers and their teachers has been paramount. Next slide. So when we entered the next phase, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education recommended that we not teach any new skills or content. This was in phase 2, but focus instead on connecting with students and deepening mastery of previously taught standards called our power standards, the most essential standards. And it was to equal about a half day of school. With the cancellation of school through the end of June, we entered phase 3. And that does include new content, new skills and content, but still focused on the most essential power standards that are needed for success in the next grade level. All along, we have endeavored in the Millis Public Schools to hit that sweet spot between meeting students' needs while not overwhelming the students or the families with too many demands, especially demands to connect at specific times of day, but providing more choice and control for families in how they were able to access it. I know, for example, with my 2 kids and both parents working from home, it just, our internet can't keep up with that. So we wanted to give families the ability to stagger when they were able to log in and get in to their various learning activities. Next. So Jen Starr, our technology director, will speak to the technology. There you go. Oh, I know. You had to.
Apparently, when I hit my space bar, it moves the slides.
Oh, okay.
Go back to the slideshow. Thank you. There we go. Thank you. So this is Jennifer Starr, the Director of Digital Learning and Innovative Educational Technologies in Millis. Millis entered into phases 1 and 2 of remote learning with quite a robust technology program already in place. And this has actually served us really well as we enter into phase 3 of remote learning. During phases 1 and 2, the technology team was very focused on meeting the needs of students, getting devices deployed, and trying to make sure that the students who needed internet access had access. During that time, the tech team was also very focused on supporting the needs of staff as they were preparing for remote learning. So a lot of support, remote support around connecting to certain apps and getting certain applications to work. The tech team has coordinated with families and the school principals at this point to deploy more than 125 student devices, as well as 4 hotspots for internet access. Also during phase 3, the tech team continues to provide remote support, maintain the district's network and infrastructure, and support teachers and families in the use of various digital learning tools. I think we're going on to Joan.
So as we began looking at the power standards that Millis Public Schools has been using for quite a while, we began to realize that for some students in some classes that these standards would be review standards. Some of them being reinforced so that the students can practice what they need to, but yet then with this phase 3 coming on board, that some of these new standards would need to be taught. So that's where our teachers are right now, is making some determinations based on individual needs as to what students need what skills at this time. Jen, the next slide, please. So in looking at new instruction and what the teachers are doing, there's been a wide range of activities that are happening in all of our classrooms. And some of those things have been via online video instruction. Some of them have been sort of filmed video instruction so that it's not a live situation, and that offering to students the opportunity for some real world application and hands-on activities that can be done in their homes to secure some of those skills that need to be either reinforced or being introduced the first time. And throughout the whole process, meeting the individual needs of students who may need more supports or different supports. And those would be students who may have IEPs or would be in our ELL population. And always keeping in mind that we have a tiered system of support for all of our students, and some students need more, some students need different. And so those are some of the things that are going on in this new phase 3. Jen? And as Nancy mentioned earlier, one of our biggest pieces that we're concerned about is certainly making sure our students are engaged and that we are reaching out to families to make sure that students are participating. And the teachers, as well as the guidance counselors and the principals, have been meeting with students or contacting families either through emails or phone calls, just to make sure that they are aware, that students know that we see them, that we want to reach out to them, that we want them to be participants, and that we are, for those reluctant participants in whole group Google Meets, that we may be doing that by having an individual participation and just having the teacher reach out to one student at a time. Jen? And again, all of the pieces that Nancy mentioned a little bit, we are still working towards roughly half the amount of time that students would spend in the school day, that students should be engaged in school activities, and that some things are online, some of them are offline. Teachers, for the most part, have been sending home the assignments at the beginning of the week, either on Sunday or Monday, and therefore the students have some opportunity to make some judgment as to what works for them and what works for their families. Some teachers are having office hours and individual meetings, as I mentioned, but I think more importantly too is that in addition to schoolwork, that there has been a concerted effort to make sure that there's interest-based groups. We have a couple of groups that are meeting by book clubs and by sing-alongs and workshops. And I know our high school is participating in a happiness club where anyone can join at a certain point at a prearranged time. And it's just really nice for the students to get together and to connect with one another. And also our counselors are helping to facilitate groups based on needs for those students that need them.
So this is Joe Russo, principal at the Claude Brown. Continuing here with remote learning. We are all doing weekly learning activities that are emailed out to families, mostly on the weekend so that they can start on Monday. Some families at the elementary level have asked that they have over the weekend to complete some activities because they are working Monday through Friday, and so they work with their students on the weekends to get their activities connected to their teachers. We've really tried to streamline communication so people aren't getting bombarded. Some feedback that we've gotten is that, many people are getting numerous emails from different service providers. So we are really making the teams really work together to identify, contact people with certain families who have multiple adults working with their children. And we provided sample daily schedules, a weekly calendar. We want to make sure that we change up our communication with students and activities that they provide to give them a wide range of opportunities. Again, with the must-dos and the can-dos. So there are certain things that are identified. These include not only the academic areas, but also areas that, unified arts areas, so that there's a physical component, which is part of phase 3, that we focus on the extensions and the physical opportunities for students. Those choice boards and weekly checklists are, turned in many times to teachers so they know what has been accomplished by students, and teachers are maintaining records of all those things. We use mostly Google Classroom, and in the upper grades, It's Learning is certainly something that is used there too as well. I'm going to pass it now off to Assistant Principal and Counselor Elise Malloy. I think.
All right, thank you so much. I forgot to unmute myself. This is Elise Malloy. Thank you, Joe. Our teachers, as Joan had mentioned, have been talking about student levels of engagement, and our teachers have been collecting information on each student's level of participation and engagement during this time. What they're noticing is when they have a student, if they haven't heard from someone or they aren't participating in online activities, then the teachers would reach out directly to the student or to the family to see if they can support them. If they weren't able to access that family or student, they would connect with the counseling team, and our counselors would reach out to families to see what we could provide for assistance. We would get back information about if they needed devices, if they needed counseling support, or any other needs that might be necessary to help the students access school. Our teachers and staff have been providing individual students with specific feedback, and this is in order to continue our personalization and to support students with specific needs. Our staff have been having weekly meetings and team meetings to collaborate between the special education and general education staff, and this is able to provide a high level of collaboration and support for all student needs. I'm going to toss it back to Joe.
So at Claude Brown, speaks specifically, I have to just say in general, I've been so impressed with the way teachers have just really embraced this new learning and make it work for students. And, with all the support of families have been unbelievable. If you go onto the Clyde Brown remote learning page, families have been sending in some photographs of their students working at home. It's just so enjoyable to look and see what families are doing, and amazing things that are happening. So I encourage you to take a look through that if you haven't. So we started by doing some surveys of families and teachers, as we all did throughout the district, to make sure we understood kind of what their needs were. And in that, as Nancy mentioned, trying to find that sweet spot. And that's where we came up with this concept of the choice boards. And then in phase 3, to include the must-dos and can-dos with teachers looking closely at what the state has provided as grade level expectations and how they match with the power standards, and making sure that over the next 7 weeks that we are embracing those skills that have not been taught, so that students are prepared for the next grade, in knowing that there's going to be lots of review for the next grade teacher to complete some tasks that were not able to be completed online, because we can't guarantee that every student is doing every task, obviously. So there are weekly face-to-face opportunities, both in whole group and in some small groups. And we've encouraged in this next phase to look for opportunities for small groups for teachers to invite students in to do some specific tasks. We've also provided some document cameras for some teachers because interventionists have joined in this round as well. And so they are using some of those cameras to actually do some skill-based work in their home, so that children can actually see, rather than holding up to the screen like I'm doing now. They actually can connect through their computer, so students can actually watch teachers and demonstrate and model for students what they are asking them to accomplish. That is also true in special education lessons. Those are individual and small group lessons that are happening weekly. So some students are getting multiple opportunities to work with teachers, but we also have an opportunity to do some social connection as well. It's not just about the academics. And I know some teachers are doing some sessions that are more game-based, so that kids have an opportunity to do something socially with their classmates virtually, since they can't see them day to day, and that's what they're missing probably the most, at least at the elementary level. So we do send out a weekly newsletter updating families with what's happening, and we've added a video message from either Elise or myself or Clyde the Bear to engage students and let them know that we are happy and working with them and missing them a lot. And so for the future, we have begun the placement planning process in grades K to 5. Student and family notifications will happen before the end of the year, as they have in the past, this time virtually rather than visiting the class in person. We're also planning in the future, when the governor opens up and our ability to be involved, her teachers come in to begin to do some work of closing things up in their classrooms, as well as gathering student belongings and having families have an opportunity to pick that up probably later in the month or early in June. Next.
Hi, everyone. Maureen Knowlton here, principal of the middle school. So as not to be repetitive, what we're doing at the middle school very much mirrors what you've heard already through this slideshow from Joan and from Joe and Elise. We have attempted to make remote learning as personalized as possible to help students and families adapt and be successful. We can't mirror the school day, but we're doing the best we can, and we too follow a weekly format, delivering assignments with some video instruction and some face-to-face meetings. Students should be meeting with teachers at least once a week with each teacher, but there are multiple opportunities for more if they need it. And like you heard, there are also opportunities for things like book club or the Happiness Club with the high school. We have a Just for Fun Google Classroom and some other things coming up. We've been guided by feedback from students and parents and teachers so that we could adapt as we went along based on what was working and what was not working. And that's been truly helpful to us in making it, the best possible scenario for families at home, because we know that it's not easy. In some ways, we felt like it was September, the beginning of the school year, all over again, and we are now settling into a pretty good routine. We are focused on the recommendations of the Department of Ed around recommended standards, but particularly on encouraging ongoing engagement from middle school students. And to that end, we've tried to continue some of our typical routines with morning announcements and recognizing students with student shout outs that get mailed home. Teachers write something up and recognize their effort and their participation. And we really have been truly amazed by some of the projects students are completing at home and some of the activities that they're bringing their families in to participate with. So we're really excited to see what they're doing at home. We, like everybody else, are proceeding with discussions around closure to the end of the school year. We know that there are some things we need to take care of and plan for, especially the 8th grade promotion, and transitioning to next year and bringing 5th grade over and making everyone feel comfortable with that transition. So we're talking about those things and planning to do it as best we can virtually if we can't do anything in person. And like Clyde Brown, the middle school is so grateful for our partnership with parents and families, and all they're doing at home to help keep students involved and learning. And, you know, everybody's doing the best they can at this difficult time. The teachers certainly are going above and beyond, making their own videos and, you know, doing whatever they can to try and get kids excited about participating from home.
Hi, I'm Bob Millenium, the high school principal. And again, I don't want to be redundant with some of the things that other people have spoken about this evening. Just a few things that kind of pertain to the high school. Since phase 2 of online learning, we've been working as students receiving credit or no credit based on their completion of work. So we're not grading students the traditional A, B, C, etc. But we do have this credit, no credit a system of accountability to hopefully be another lever to keep kids engaged. When we originally went out on March 13th, we didn't know how long it would be before we were back, but we were kind of hoping that we would be back. So we combined terms 3 and 4, figuring that we'd have graded assignments in term 3, and then we'd have some opportunity for graded assignments in term 4. But with the governor's latest order, now that we're in phase 3, we know we're not going to be back for term 4. So we're still working on how final grades and GPAs are going to be calculated, and we're still waiting for some guidance from the Department of Education on that. So that's something that's still in the works, but hopefully we'll have some more clarity on that soon. Again, like the middle and Clyde Brown, we're using both asynchronous models and live meets. What we've found is that the asynchronous lessons seem to work for more kids at the high school level because they can access it as best fits their schedule. We do have some kids in the high school who are now working full time, and they're the only the only members of their family who are actually earning a paycheck during this pandemic. So some kids are accessing the lessons later at night. But we found that the asynchronous works well for the lessons. The live sessions seem to work better for small groups, extra help, and a lot of the live meetings are just about kids connecting with their classmates and teachers, which is, as Nancy mentioned, a huge part of what we're trying to do, a huge priority. Some teachers are also using virtual office hours, so we're trying to keep in contact with kids. As Maureen mentioned, with transitions, we're working on having end of year activities and celebrations for a class of 2020. I had a meeting with the class officers last week, and one of the class leaders said, we want our class to be remembered for, positive, ending the year in a positive way. We don't want to be remembered as a class that had everything taken away by this pandemic. So, we really want to celebrate these kids, and I'd like to thank a lot of the parents in the town and teachers who are really going out of their way to celebrate the class of 2020. You may have seen some of the lawn signs in front of seniors' homes. A group of parents led by Tammy Coots and Sharon Valancourt and Shannon Graham. I know I'm missing some parents, but they were the driving force behind getting all our seniors those lawn signs on their homes. The fire department put a big banner over Route 109 today
to celebrate our senior class. We're working on some other things. The police and fire department are going to work with us on a parade for the class of 2020. So, we're really working on celebrating the kids, and I'm meeting with the entire class tomorrow evening to get kind of their thoughts on graduation and things like that. I think right now, from what I'm hearing from the kids I've spoken to, is if at all possible, they would like to do some kind of live ceremony where they are together. And if we can do that, we will definitely do that.
Bob, I don't mean to interrupt the presentation, but I just want to let you know, just on that topic specifically, graduation. As a school committee, we are all very much in support of finding a way to do a live graduation, even if that is obviously, if it's not June and it's July and it's August. We are very supportive of doing that.
Thank you. That's right. Because I think the kids, again, I'm meeting with the whole class tomorrow, but the kids I've talked to in the senior class, and I've talked to many of them, really would like that type of event. So much of the celebration of their end of high school is about being together, and they haven't had that. So to the extent that we can do something to let them be together, I really appreciate the school committee's support in that. Yes, moving on.
Joanne Marks, I'm the Director of Student Services, and I'm honored to report that special education and related services have been provided remotely across the district and by districts, by out of district schools as well. So 175 students have their IEPs being delivered. What that means is that an individual remote learning plan has been created for each one of these students, describing how in this environment that they will be supported and receive instruction in the ways that you've heard earlier. An important part, of course, is that collaboration between general and special educators and related service providers. It has been an incredible effort, and I'm so honored to be part of the team that has made the commitment to make sure that we're being effective. Another thing that we found very important from the beginning, as folks have mentioned, is the communication with parents. I can't thank the CPAC enough for how many times we called them and said, will you look at this? Will you review this document with us? Can we have a conversation? We're also sharing a calendar of services so that parents get a 2-week calendar of services that outlines everything. I'm afraid that we were over communicating at the beginning, and they were oftentimes receiving an abundance of emails, and it was difficult to sort, especially in our younger family, what was a priority. So we've combined our communication. We've done some surveys both to staff and parents. Our next hope is to do something with students in the upper grades to find out what they are learning, what they like, what they appreciate. But from the feedback from staff, it really is an individual process for our students. And we've had some amazing surprises for students who have just actually found a sort of a groove in this remote environment. But I'd have to say for most, as well as for most of the staff members, we're finding the reinvention of education challenging. We sent home news notes every a few weeks in a row, and as needed, to update on some of the changing requirements in special education and what we're hoping to do. And of course, the interpersonal contact that we've had with families, and organizing meetings, team meetings is the next thing that's in process. And it's actually been a really wonderful thing because staff members have been together and have been able to hear so many positive remarks from families, and a lot of gratitude. And I think that's the part that gets to be missing sometimes when we're engaged in this remote learning. and we're in the process of planning summer services. And I use the word plan loosely because we don't quite know the form that that's going to take. But we will keep you all informed and be sending notices home to parents once those things have been determined. Thank you.
So for next steps, we are awaiting more guidance from the Department of Education, and the Commissioner of Education is in frequent contact with state officials and the Department of Public Health. So we will utilize that and adhere to the guidelines for summer, any programming we have in the summer, and to plan for next fall. More immediately, we will be probably the end of May, beginning of June, we will let families know a schedule for coming to pick up the students' belongings that were left in school. And, you know, because none of us at that time thought that this would go on so long. Bob mentioned, especially at the high school level, there will be more guidance coming on grading, but the expectation is that the vast majority of students will continue on to the next grade level as usual. And we are stepping up our feedback systems and assessments to see where students are in their learning. We're tracking that carefully. We'll be doing more and more of that as we move through the next 6 weeks and into the fall to make sure that students get what they need, find out where they are. And I have to say, as a couple people have mentioned, because Millis had embarked upon a blended learning model with technology enhancing our learning and instruction, and then a personalized approach, that this has not been a sea change for Millis. Teachers have had to work very, very hard, and the administrative team, the principals, are doing phenomenal work, as are the directors, Dr. Marks and Joan Lynn and Jen Starr, and everybody's pulled together very well to make this happen. But in philosophy, we were in a better situation than a lot of districts because we have the one-to-one learning environment, and students in all grades were used to using their devices and used to using the software programs that we have. So we will continue to solicit feedback from students and the families, and of course include families and your input as we embark upon planning for summer programming and the fall. Next. And we thank you all very, very much. We know remote learning is not perfect. We miss everybody terribly. And there's a vital connection that makes schools a very vibrant place to be. And I think all of us are missing that. But as I said, it has been an incredibly positive experience in terms of how well everybody has pulled together, families and educators, to make this work. And so we thank you all very much for that. And now we'll see if there are any particular questions.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks to everybody who presented tonight. First, I just want to commend you all for adapting in this. We've all, in all aspects of our lives, we all had to kind of change very quickly on how things have done. And I, for one, have seen through a couple of different lenses and different venues of how the administrators, staff, and students are adapting and have really continuously worked to make sure kids are getting things they need, whether it's finding an extra Chromebook to get to a family, getting them a hotspot if that's what they needed, maybe, off hour conversations or ability to drop things off at students' houses if that's what was needed to provide the student the opportunity to get the materials that they needed. So first off, thank you all for what you guys are doing. One question that I've heard that I just want to throw out, and any or all can answer. The idea of, we see one of the only kind of lines in the sand you see from DESE is the student should be getting a half a day of work. And one question that I've had is how should parents be measuring it? How should parents measure that? And it's tough because I think different kids potentially do things at different rates. And so how are the administrators and teachers viewing, what should be 3 hours worth of work?
Bob?
Yeah, Mark, I can say at the high school level, one of the things the teachers doing, the first swipe at it is if there's a student who they find is not participating in a given week, the first contact is with the student. Teacher sending an email to the student, asking if they need any assistance, would they like to, live meet or something like that. And if that kind of message goes without a response, then the next message would probably be like an email that would include the parent on it. And in that way, if a student is kind of falling behind in this, because you're right, some kids take longer than others to do the same work. But the idea is to, at the high school level, to try and get the students on track on their own first. And then if that's not working, a message to the parents. And then, also sometimes, and Riley can speak to this, our counseling staff is involved with, reaching out to those kids who we have a particular concern about. But it's very different among kids. I mean, I've talked to some kids who say, they say it's half a day of learning, but it takes me so much longer to do it because I'm doing it all, on my own without being in a class. And some kids are really struggling with that. So I think the best thing we can do is kind of communicate with families if we think there's an issue there.
Yeah,
And it
Joe.
kind of goes on the other side too, is there's, I think, to me, that's kind of part of the answer is the difference in kids. So for the kids there are some kids who are struggling with whatever the course load is, but then you can potentially on the flip side have kids who are not necessarily spending 3 hours a day because maybe they just get it quicker or they're moving. So just like in school when it's in session, there are ranges, and I think even though 3 hours might be a guideline, I think one thing that's important, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's not hard and fast that every kid is going to spend exactly 3 hours or half a day.
Yeah, exactly. And I've also had some conversations with parents whose kids, have been overwhelmed by the amount of work and saying, the most important, the priority here is their health and well-being. And if it's becoming too stressful, tell them to stop, reach out to the teacher and we address it that way.
Cool.
Joe, go ahead.
So obviously, we said here, it's really challenging to be able to police this, to know exactly how much time is being set up for children and during their day. However, that's the whole concept of a choice board. The choice board was to have activities, and teachers have really heard about sort of the half day, the 3-hour piece, and so that the must-do components of young students' academic life should really take up most of that time. But to account for that varying rate of speed or interest of students, they've added these optional activities, so that can be added to make if they need more time or they need less time, again, depending on each family situation. It's been quite the balancing act to try to figure all this out, because what pleases one family is going to annoy another family, right? So we know that going in. And I think it's really important for us to just keep in mind that really, as Nancy said, so that sweet spot has been really what we've all tried to really focus on. And obviously, the younger the student, probably the less time. It has to be shorter amounts of time. And I know that, there are families who struggle with their kids in 15 minutes and then they're ready to do something else. Well, we know that. That's kind of what we do in elementary school. But that's been a challenge for a lot of families because that's not what they're used to doing with their children. So again, we appreciate it and we know that it's not perfect and we're learning a lot as we go by each day.
Maureen, did you want to go ahead?
Yes, so I think communication is the most important piece here between families and teachers. And we have encouraged, parents to let us know if they feel like what we're giving is too much or not enough. I think the challenge for teachers is not being able to look over a student's shoulder and see in real time how quickly they're catching on or how much extra, support that they need, and be able to jump in and adjust when they need to. So like I said, the teachers have been getting feedback from the kids, and the student surveys, most of them are saying they're getting just enough. A few are saying they're getting way too much, please cut down. And nobody's really clamoring for more, but when the teachers offer enrichment, there are students who are doing more. So that's why those Google meetings in person too, where the teacher and students can talk and they can get a sense of whether they need more and are ready to do more and can provide some enrichment. Like Claude Brown, I think some of the middle school teachers, most of them are giving choices, are giving some sort of, this is what I expect you to do, but this is what I want you to move on to when you're ready, and hoping that most kids would take advantage of that. I think, just again, if the more we can get information from families about what's happening inside their home, the better we can adjust and make it, sort of more personalized for people. But it is hard. It's that balancing act that Joe talked about.
Great. Thanks, guys. Before we go to any questions that Joan has through YouTube, anybody else on the committee have any questions, comments? All right. Joan, do we have any questions from YouTube?
There are no questions for YouTube.
Wow. That's great. Actually, I think, again, that speaks to some of the communication that I think you guys have and teachers have all done to try and make sure people know what's going on and reaching out to families and doing that there aren't a ton. I think if we did this March 18th, there would have been a lot more questions and a lot more uncertainty as to how this all plays out. So hearing that, then great. Then I will let you guys all get back to what you want to do in your evening. Thank you guys very much for joining us tonight and walking through this. And we'll see how the next 6 weeks go.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice seeing all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is our financial review.
Okay, I will ask Mr. Wiggin to briefly go over his memo that he provided for you.
All right. And I think I've unmuted myself.
Yeah, sure.
So I would say let's first start with the general operating fund, which I would say is in very good shape. But I would also say there's a caveat to that. Right now, I'm projecting that we would end with a fund balance, and I'm going to say of at least $183,459, which is up slightly from the last time I reported to you. Now, included in that number, I want to stress the words included in that number, is a set aside of approximately $151,000 for potential COVID-19 purchases that we would make depending on what we find out would be the types of things we need to do for next year. So, for example, there are a few things that our nurses have been working on, that our director of operations has been working on, that we're pretty sure of. For example, our nurses will want to be ordering the thermometers that you just point at someone's forehead and get the temperature from. We're pretty sure about that. We know about masks and gloves for at least our operating staff, certainly for our nurses. Those are things we know of. As we get more guidance from the CDC and from the state, that may determine other things that we may or may not need to do. Do I think I'm going to need all $151,000? Probably not. But what we did is we tried to set aside, and they're highlighted in sky blue in your financial report, the possibility in different areas of where we might need to spend some money, preferably this year, to order this year out of this year's funds, because obviously we've had savings, some items that we would need to implement whatever our new normal is, for lack of a better term, for next year. Any questions on Fund 10?
I don't have any questions. One thing, and I don't know whether I would hope that guidance would come out, and as things shape up, I'm also cognizant, hopefully there'll be some federal and state money coming in for next year. But in addition to masks for staff, just do you have factored in masks for students in that? And do you masks for students?
Oh, let me just say this. I have calculated masks for students.
Okay.
If we have to do masks for students, we are in serious trouble.
Okay.
All right. Masks for students would increase that number by close to $500,000.
Okay.
All right. And that's just for Little Millis.
Yeah.
So you can imagine what a Worcester or a Boston, what the cost would be if that comes down as a guideline. So my guess is if we do need to do masks for students as part of a guideline, there's going to be some pushback. Well, there's going to be some requests for funding. I guess I'll put it that way. If we're asked to do it with the school district providing that funding, because that's going to be some serious funding that we simply don't have.
Okay. All right.
Not saying it's not necessarily something that may or may not be a good idea. I'm not commenting on that to anybody.
Yeah, no, just right.
It's going to cost.
We don't know, and there will, in my opinion, there will become a tipping point of of how much costs of new normal,
right?
Districts and towns and will be able to absorb before there has to be some relief.
Exactly. Another issue is we still don't quite know what transportation will look like. Our transportation coordinator is attending a couple of different webinars this week. We're hoping she may get some hints, but we still haven't seen any guidance. But to social distance on a bus is hard. To social distance on a van is harder. And so whether that means we have to change the way we do runs, whether that means we may need to increase vehicles. I mean, again, all of those are things we simply don't know some things right now, which is why I call them a contingency and not something that's, carved in stone.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Catalano.
Terry, thank you for this. Could I request just because this is not the last time we're going to talk about this, could you call out kind of and create a memo or a spreadsheet of potential expenses? So when we start to have this conversation again, this is great and this is part of the regular review, but just a working document that starts to outline and put in buckets potential cost. I'd even suggest that at some point, I suspect that you're doing it now, tracking what we've spent to date versus what we're going to spend through the rest of the fiscal year, and then the kind of same sheet in a different bucket, what the potential cost could be with the regular opening on, I forget the date, September, let's just say September 1st. A regular opening on September 1st, well, I guess you can't plan for a hybrid opening. So what would the regular opening be? Because there's still going to be cleaning supplies. There's still going to be things that we need to do differently if we're all back in school at the same time. I'm not going to make you go through kind of this, what would it look like if, every other day we're in school, unless the state starts to give us some projections where you could work off of. I don't want to make you do work just to do work, but what is it? What do we know now?
Right.
And what do we think we're going to need on September 1st for a regular opening?
No, I think I understand what you're requesting, and we've actually already started that exercise a little bit. You're right. We're still pulling together some of those numbers. I know Sue Ann and Nancy met this morning to talk about some of the nurses' requests, and then later on, Sue Ann spoke with me about those same requests. John Engler and I have spoken about some of the different things he's identified, and I've started to put them together in sort of a tracking spreadsheet, which is why I could so quickly come up with the cost of masks for students. So we are pulling together that, and I would say at the next meeting, with hopefully more guidance, but also hopefully more defined numbers in that spreadsheet, we could put it together into a memo with more detail for you.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Another question, kind of this is more of an exercise in a philosophical conversation or project. If we're not back in school on September 1st, we all hope, everyone here hopes that we are. If we're not back in school on September 1st and we needed to stretch this remote learning out, are there additional costs or things that the district would have to do that would have a budgetary impact that we've gotten through March through to today, and we're going to get through June 17th? But what if we had to do this for another 4 months to the end of the calendar year? Are there costs that we know we would have to incur around technology, around staffing, around resources, around training?
Yep. I think we can work with the administrative team, and we can try to start and we can try to start and identify some of those costs. Now, obviously, things change as we get more guidance from Department of Education, from the governor, and even from the federal government through the CDC. I was on their site today, and for example, they're recommending social distancing in classrooms. We all know that classrooms were never designed for students to be 6 feet apart, so that raises some challenges that we need to think about if we're going to be required to do that. But yes, we can do those things.
Thank you.
One other thing while we're on the operating budget that I need to raise, there was a decision to pay our food service workers through May 4th at a previous meeting. As that motion essentially expired yesterday, and obviously the closure remains through the end of the year, I have anticipated in the financial report that we would be paying the food service workers through the end of the year, but we would really need another motion from the committee if indeed that is your will.
And if I may, we could make the motion to be generic and say a motion to approve to pay all current employees through June 17th.
That would probably be wise.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I'm going to make a motion, but I'm going to ask a question first. Terry, in our budget now, right? Obviously, all employees were budgeted last year. So when we started the fiscal year on July 1, there were numbers. Has anything occurred budgetarily that limits our ability? Well, I guess I'm going to answer my question is we have an overage of 180. We have savings of 183. Never mind. I'm going to strike my question.
An additional contingency of 150.
Yeah.
I thought the 150 was, isn't the 150 part of the 183, or is that 150 on top of 183?
On top of.
Yeah. That essentially is on top of it. If we don't spend that 150, that would be
you
in
were giving
addition
us
to the
an option
183.
of
Right.
either pay the tuition ahead of time or save it as a thing. So we're talking three.
Right now, you would add those two numbers together.
I may give him a raise. All right, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Mr. Catalano.
I make a motion to cover all existing employees in the district to be paid until the last day of school. Presently targeted to end on 6/17. And I'm going to just give us a little wiggle room in case something happened.
Okay.
The last day of school. You get that, Becky?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye, sorry, I was muted.
That's okay. All right,
Thank you.
motion carries.
If we are done with Fund 10, I would move on to the revolving funds, which were sent out to you. And I'm going to work from the summary, but I can go to an individual fund if we need to.
Terry, just one second. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the memo again.
Yep.
I'm currently projecting a positive fund balance of 183 and change.
Yes.
First, a reminder that we need 133 to repay tuition
Correct.
to get to the 4% over budget figure, to our 4% budget figure. Second, the above figure includes 150. Mark, where am I?
So the 180, so of the 180, we have to spend 130. Currently, we're spending 130 on prepaying tuition.
Correct.
But on top of the 180, so really start with it's 180 plus 150. So just say it's 330. Of the 330, we're spending we've already earmarked 133 of it for prepaid tuition.
No, I get that. So when we got down to where we would have savings, we had put the 150 aside. We put the 150 aside. That was then at that point we had then added an additional 183.
Right.
And if you look in your detail lines, you'll see the sky blue lines, and you'll see projected. For example, I just scrolled up a little bit from the bottom, and I came to like system-wide acquisition of equipment, 16,000 projected as an expense. Custodial acquisition of equipment projected as an expense, 9,500. That's just two parts of that 150,000, but it's projected as an expense. So, all right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, I'm all set.
All right. So moving on to the revolving funds, I would say that I didn't do the grants because the grants we're due to make a request for money for the grants, which will bring them all, the grants will never not be positive, so they're all fine. But what I focused on was sort of the major revolving funds, and there are really 5 in particular, I guess I would note. The transportation, which is going to, right now, projected to have a positive balance. Extended day, which is right now projected to have a positive balance. Kindergarten, which is projected to have a positive balance, but a very small one. Custodial, which right now has a negative balance, and food service, which right now has a negative balance. Of those 5, all 5 of those could possibly require some form of transfer. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the transfer would have to come from Fund 10. So, for example, the history of the district for food service has been when you've gone into deficit, you've transferred to that from choice. Custodial, you have a pretty decent balance in school rental, and you could transfer from school rental to cover custodial.
Terry,
Yeah, go ahead.
what's missing on this sheet, and we really should come up with a standardized sheet because this sheet has changed multiple times. What was the beginning balance for transportation?
Well, again, that's why you have all the individual sheets, or they should be there. But so, for example, with transportation began with a beginning balance of 68,102. And I've shown an estimated transfer in that particular point, but we estimate the revenue to be 133,702. And we estimate the expenses, and in that particular case, I had detailed the expenses. I did not get a chance to detail all of them, of 144,509. And so without the transfer, the projected balance would be 57,296. With the transfer, it would be 77,296.
If we could just, I get that you have the detail, but if you could put the beginning balance too, because that's helpful as well.
Well, again, on the individual sheets, the beginning balance is there. And I believe they're the format that the committee has requested me to use.
Well,
the summary the summary was really a last minute addition. I can include the summary on the beginning balance on the summary. I neglected to do that. I was just trying to.
No, I'm just telling you, we've had it in the past. It is helpful.
No, I'm not disagreeing.
Okay.
I guess because it was on all the individual sheets, I didn't think about it. I apologize.
It's fine.
Yep.
So, Terry, one question on, can you just, and I'm more thinking about this in terms of as we get into fiscal 21 and potential on revenue reductions from the state.
Yep.
The circuit breaker fund looks like so we'll have a projected balance at the end of this year of 305,000 if I'm reading the.
Correct.
Okay. So, and historically so that does not include circuit breaker funding that we would get next year.
Correct.
And so historically what we've done is we have only budgeted to spend, in essence, what we've had to end the year. So next year we would look to cap ourselves at this $300,000 to spend
also correct.
So how much are we anticipating coming in for next year for circuit breaker? Do we know that?
I don't think we know that yet, other than I think we believe it is going to go down.
Okay.
And it's not so much that the percentage may go down because of the year we've had and the strain on revenues for the state, but I think just because of the cases that are eligible, I believe have gone down. So the amount of money that we have that exceeds the 3 times the average cost probably are less.
All right. So did we bring in, so we brought in 543,000 this year?
Um,
If I'm looking at the
no.
summary?
Looks like.
Yes. But I think
Okay.
that includes the fund balance.
Okay, the original fund balance?
That includes the original fund balance.
Oh yeah, here it is on the summary sheet. All right, so we had a balance of 266. We've brought in another 277 and we
Right.
spent 238. So theoretically, we have at least a year. We're gonna have twice as much as what, balances. If we need to go into this, we've talked about in previous years, this is a place where our district kind of unspoken or unwritten rule of only spending last year's amount, this is a place where we can go a little bit deeper if we need to make things work next year.
Yes, you could.
The other piece on school choice, and we've gone into this too. One of the things that we built into our 4% was moving 100,000, give or take, of salaries out of choice into the operating budget. Can you remind me, just because I'm trying to pull it up on my phone and I can't do 2 things at once, obviously, apparently. If we are successful in getting 4% and we can move that money over, how much were we bringing choice dollars down to?
Well, you will be basically removing approximately 1 teacher's salary. So if you are able to not have to fund that, maybe I'm not understanding your question. Ask your question again. So I think I'm going to give you the wrong answer.
I guess I'll look at it this way. So this year, and this might be FY19.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the school choice individual schedule that you included. All right. If I'm so in this year, we spent $615,000 out of choice.
Correct.
So if we get 4%, and the numbers are going to be slightly different,
right,
we would in essence only be spending $500,000 out of choice.
Correct. And so in theory, we would increase our projected balance in 21.
Correct. So if we have an estimated, balance plus revenue is 930 minus 615. So we're going to end with 324, and we're going to spend either 600 or 500.
Right. Correct.
And we're going to get about 400,000 in.
Correct. 445, I think, was the estimate. Nancy's nodding her head, so if we both agree, we must be close.
If you want, I can grab the budget book, but it was a little more than our revenue this year is a little more than the 409 as well. And next year, I think it was 445.
All right. So if I am doing this right, based on where we're saying we're going to end this year, adding 440,000 for next year and spending all 615. So this would be kind of a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
That would leave us at the end of 21 with 155,000.
Yes, approximately correct.
So if we are able to move this choice funds back into the operating budget, choice salaries, we could potentially be at the end of next year up to 255,000.
Correct. And depending on how the year goes, obviously, maybe even a little bit better.
Right. But just walk through. So that again gives us a little bit of understanding as we go into this for one, understanding what we want to do as we, or need to do as we get out of this year, and also
Correct.
managing any type of budget gap that we have.
Yep.
So, if these are places we can, as we look to, if we've got to spend more than 150 to get the school prepared for a post-COVID opening,
Absolutely.
these are the two places that we're going to need to be pretty clean on.
Yep.
And thankfully, it looks like we've got a little bit of room that we can get through what might be a cut in state funding and absorbing some post-COVID additional expenses.
I would agree.
Okay. All right.
Other questions? I will make that change to the summary.
So I think for the next school committee meeting, we will bring forward recommendations for budget transfers for some of the early transfers that we're recommending. And then later, as we get to June, we usually do fourth quarter transfers.
Right. We as soon as we can identify, just to echo Nancy's comments, as soon as we can identify some of the COVID-19 purchases, we want to place them, because even if they do not come in by June 30th, they will be encumbered, and that way they'll still be committed to this year's budget.
Yeah, Terry, when do you have to, when will you have to ensure you have everything encumbered in terms of salaries or expenses that would need to? I want to make sure that everything that every expense that we would have related to this fiscal year, whether it be personnel costs or other expenses, is locked down before you have to encumber things. Because if there are expenses that are not settled on prior to you having to encumber, we would have to absorb them into the fiscal 21 budget.
Correct. I would tell you legally June 30th, practically June 20th.
Okay.
And that's the target date I have in my mind, is June 20th.
Okay.
And in fact, my staff and I are already, I have one of my staff members has already started to unencumber purchase orders. So and that's not included in your financial report, but that will be a bonus in the next report. But also we've talked through about some errors that we maybe made in last year in not encumbering. For example, we didn't encumber for one of Andy's bills. Okay, well, we won't make that mistake this year. We will encumber some money for, a June bill for Andy, because we will know that it will inevitably be coming, things like that. So we're reviewing, both the good and the bad of our encumbrances last year, and we're going to get that done well in advance.
Great. Okay.
Other questions?
Great. All right. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda, Chairman's report. So Nancy, Terry, and I attended the Finance Committee meeting last week. They're still basically moving along as best they can. What was presented to them by the finance director was a revenue assumption based on basically what they have right now, which includes the governor's proposed budget, which was released in January. She also presented a 5% and a 10% cut in state aid. So those are options that I guess are out on the table. In a 10% worst case scenario, and probably even even in the 5%, I know that there are discussions between selectmen and finance committee about utilizing stabilization funds, potentially at a slightly higher level than would normally go in, to help balance, because a 10% cut in state aid would basically be level funding everybody, if we don't use stabilization funds. So a 5% reduction would give us about 300,000 less than what we're hoping for, and a 10% would eliminate it, all of it. So that's kind of the realms that people are dealing with, but they don't know anything more and won't probably for another month or so, which will be interesting, because I saw that I don't think the House and Senate are planning on voting until the end of June or July. And I'm not sure how that plays out for cities and towns who are required by law to have a budget by June 30. But we'll see how that goes. So that is my report on what happened there. Subcommittee report, anything from the elementary school building committee?
I actually don't have anything because we were doing our budget hearing when they had the last meeting, and I haven't heard anything. Things that were on the agenda were bill paying and and some delays that they were facing, but I'll see if I can have a better update for the next meeting.
All
I think one update is that they have installed the booster pump for water pressure issues, and we're testing that in the building, John said, and it did work too well at first, and so they're making those adjustments, and then after it did work very well, and then they'll ratchet back down the pressure because the building is empty. So if we had left it high during when the building's empty, it would have just incurred unnecessary costs. And so that was good news that it seemed to work very well.
Good.
Great. We don't have any old or new business. The only thing I want to circle on, and I know I sent an email, and I don't think anybody had concerns, but do we want it? May 19th is the next elementary school building committee meeting, correct? So that conflicts with our meeting. So do we want to meet either next Tuesday, or do we want to push this all the way to the 26th? Do people have a preference?
Or the other option was to, if we don't do it on a Tuesday night, instead of the 19th, we could choose some other evening that week, the 20th, a Wednesday night, depending on committee members' availability on other weeknights.
And travel plans and things.
What else is there to do?
Yeah.
I have no plans. Doesn't matter.
I'm sorry.
Days turn into nights. That's it.
Fully busy on that calendar week. I could do it that week if people want to do that same week.
Yeah, I'm fine that another day that week is fine.
Okay. All right.
As long as you're talking evening, I have no other commitments.
Yeah. Okay. Then we'll find another night that week.
All right.
I'll send an email out tomorrow, and we can just pick one.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. Do we have executive session? Anything? There wasn't anything in the folder.
There should be. Yes, we do have executive session.
Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to go to executive session.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Gibbons.
I make a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session.
For
Oh,
union.
yeah. Yeah, for union negotiation discussion.
It's been moved.
Second.
Seconded. So roll call vote. Denise,
Aye.
Steve,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Robin.
I think we lost Robin.
Robin, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Her profile picture says yes.
Right?
Hello, look how young she looks. Like she looks like that's her high school picture.
This is on tape and YouTube. Be nice.
No,
Finally, yes.
Okay.
All right. So we will adjourn to executive session.